Hey friends, good evening. Welcome. My name is Michael. I'm one of the co-pastors here at Central, and I've got Cleve and Julia here with me too, fellow co-pastors. And this is like part two. I don't know if this is a series of videos or what we're doing with this, but this is the second of our Monday conversations, where we try to bring in experts to kind of talk about different things that are going on. I couldn't find any experts this week, so you're stuck with Vincent and Matt, but yeah, we're going to be talking a little bit about maybe what the post-pandemic church looks like. And these two guys are, I think, some of the most creative, innovative, thoughtful people in our conference. So looking forward to hearing from them. I'll tell you how I know these guys. Matt has become a friend. We met through a fellow pastor, and probably about 5 years ago or so.
Yeah.
Matt's been one of those guys during my ministry where when I've had days of thinking about quitting, that's kind of been that like sustaining presence for me, and you can keep going in this. So that's great. And then Vincent, of course, is our district superintendent and has been a huge support for Central and helping us kind of think creatively about the church. So, but I'll let you guys talk a little bit more about yourself. Vincent, why don't you go first? Anything you want to tell folks?
Yeah, I mean, you said that, I'm the superintendent. I really use missional strategists. I think it's part of what that concept is. I'm kind of lifelong Methodist, 30 plus years ordained, and, just trying to figure out how to do ministry the best way I can.
So good. Matt, what about you, bro?
You know, I'm a local pastor too, and I have kind of a love-hate relationship with religion. Myself, kind of always outside of the inside edge of it, and got my eye sometimes on the exit, but I haven't been able to leave yet because there's something happening here. Still for me, and it still holds kind of a weight and a orbit for me. So yeah, I'm a local pastor, and then Cleve and I have the tendency to mix some things up occasionally from time to time. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So before we begin, I'd like to say two things. I think what I appreciate most about both Vince and Matt as it relates to it. One, I'd like to say Matt was a person I met back in 2015, 16 that I say kind of helped me even come back to consider ministry again, right? Back when it was on kind of edge, he was this guy, was kind of like, yo, man, I'm excited. Let's do some stuff. Have you heard about these people doing stuff? I was like, you Christian people ain't doing anything. You know what I'm saying? I said, no, don't get me wrong. I'm still a Baptist. I still claim it, but that's really a name only because y'all not really doing anything anymore. And we began doing stuff together. He was, like he said, on the edge doing that. And I say the same thing about Vince because he's continued in many ways to allow me to continue to participate in ministry work. And what I appreciate about both of them is they both have deep institutional ties to MC Church and experience in it, but also both are trying to push within structure to avenues for there to be rich and robust engagement with community. And so we're excited to have them both today to talk about some of the challenges of that, but also what those challenges look like going forward. And is there hope for the good old sister churches and what that means for everybody?
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. I hope there's hope. We'll find out. So, yeah. So on Sunday, Matt and Vincent, we looked at Ezekiel 1, which is this like, I think all the reason kids shouldn't do drugs, right? It's this crazy vision that Ezekiel sort of has. And it's, I mean, it's wild, right? There's creatures, there's like wheels inside of wheels. I mean, it's this kind of ecstatic, over the top vision. And kind of what struck out to me about that passage is, right, God, or Ezekiel encounters God like in exile. I mean, he's a priest, and yet he's sitting at the Kabar River in Babylon. This is after like the temple's been destroyed. Everything that he knows about God, religion, like it's flattened at this point. And so he's in exile. And it's in that space that God kind of shows up with this wild vision of sort of what could be. And I think it totally reframes Ezekiel's sort of worldview and blows some preconceptions to smithereens. So, exile is probably a little bit of a strong word for what we're going through right now, but I do think there are elements of kind of diaspora, the church being scattered, during this pandemic time. And I wonder if this is an opportunity for that same kind of ecstatic vision where something new might be being birthed, like it was for Ezekiel at that Kabar River kind of thing. So just kind of open-ended. what are you guys seeing right now? What sort of changes are you seeing at the church level in terms of practice? What kind of things do you think are here to stay? How are you seeing that from your respective positions right now?
Yeah, Mike, I don't know if, if we've got an overwhelming number of people that are in a place that they actually see the church in exile. I think that from my perspective, what's happening is that taking the reality that they're in and shaping it with the past understanding of how to do work day to day. And so the reality that people have is not so much that we've been scattered, but that we can't wait to get back to what we've always done. And there's been no real change in understanding. And I think that's the biggest issue, that leading a changing culture means that you can't be trying to lead change, because the changing culture is one that is so fluid that there's not an opportunity to put bricks together that you've used before to make the road. There's going to be there's going to be different material. There are going to be different opportunities. So you're not leading change, but you're actually leading a changing culture. And I don't think that's something that people see. So that's, I think, a short of what I kind of see on a daily basis.
I'd really agree with that. It feels like in some ways we're playing out that old kind of a parable, the emperor has no clothes, right? And people are saying that they see things, that things are happening, that this is going to, all these, and it is a reach back to the past to try to close something that no longer exists. And in so many ways, I think that the church has been answering questions that nobody's asking anymore. And so the pool from which people find any kind of relevance is getting smaller and smaller. So it's really only those of us in the institution and folks on the top of the institution that really care about it. And so most of the folks have moved beyond trans-institutional, inter-institutional. Institutions will always be important, but they're not going to serve the same function that they did 10 or 20 years ago.
Yeah, I agree, Matt. And I pulled a quote. It's an old quote, though, Mike. Can I read it real quick?
We'll see. Yeah, we may have to edit this out later, but we'll see. So,
well, you're gonna edit it. So anyway, it says, if the mission of the church is to permeate and mold the institutions of the world, then it could be said that a more devastating criticism of the church is not that it is professional, but it is not professional enough. That it's ingrown, mediocre, concerned with the wrong things, unwise in its allocation of resources, and naive in its conception of the problems of modern man, and I put modern people. In short, it's amateur. That's Van Harvey that said that. And I think it's pretty appropriate for what we are seeing today, is that this whole ingrown, insular, mediocre, and we can do whatever we want to do, but we're not very professional. It's really like an amateur sideshow at points in time. So that's kind of how I see, kind of answering your question too, is where is the church right now, and what is it really, and how is it impacting? What is it really doing?
If you don't mind, I have a follow-up question that's kind of brings it back, or brings it down to home, a practical question for us now. So we know that in many ways, most of our churches, especially those of you all's churches, Matt, you and Chapelwood, Vince, larger churches that you supervise, there's no going back, right? What I mean by that, brick and mortar, for many folks in these congregations now, it's going to look, you got to do some kind of hybrid model, because, for instance, if I were in one of these churches, first thing I email our ministry leader and say, look, don't ever call me to a campus anymore for a church ministry meeting anymore. It's going to be online or I'm not coming, right? I'm coming for worship, great, but no, why am I doing that now? Given this new model we're doing, right? So my question to you two now is how challenging do you think we'll adjust to that? Especially sometimes, us as preachers, we oftentimes will get up and say, y'all want to be at home on Sundays, you need to be here in this church. You need to make it. But this whole pandemic has changed that, right? We can't get up and say those kind of things anymore. because now people have seen that, it's possible for us to at least to do a lot of the business of church, right? In different kind of geographical locations and in different modes of delivery. So let's talk about that, especially, Vince, as you mentioned, when a lot of church justifications for their existence, if not budget, has been about the building, right? So what does that mean going forward? How are some of these, especially affluent churches now, gonna have to adjust as you see it, especially as not just millennials or exennials, but folk who are coming of age in this pandemic now see that there's a different way of being and communing with each other.
Yeah, I think it's Tom Rainer that has this book out, but he talks about the smaller groups that are going to be part of the future church. 25, 30 people. Not that large Sunday gathering, and I think that leaders in the church are going to have to, and as pastors in particular, that we're not trained in leading a culture of change, but we're trained to support and sustain an institution, are going to have to go back to school in some way. And that may be through, judicatories or districts or whatever, to help guide them through these challenges, because right now, they don't see it as necessary to make that shift. What they see is that I have to sustain the institution, and I have to sustain, I've got an $8 million building debt that I need to make sure that I pay, and the people who are going to pay that are the people who are going to show up on Sunday morning. They're not the people who are going to be part of this new dynamic that's happening in the world. So yeah, I mean, Cleve, that's a tough question, because we have overwhelmingly more people that are looking to come back in the building and still have the building as their focal point than those who are looking at missional engagement and turning outwardly or externally. Keeping the internal strong piece, but knowing the external piece is how you're going to recreate and redirect the church into its future.
That's right. Yeah, Vince, that's right. I mean, not only do we concentrate on our building, we concentrate on 1 hour a week. And so we focus all of our resources to a brick and mortar place for 1 hour. And for most of the time, the rest of the buildings are left unattended or they're vacated. And it's a gross misuse of land and property and creation and all those things theologically. So it's this arrogant form of capitalism that we have led ourselves to. And then I think also it's the way that we are, we're trained to think no longer works, right? I mean, Michael, you and I have kind of talked about that crisis of imagination that we're up against, is that we're still training folks for a church that no longer exists in the seminary. And so the way that we even talk about kind of classic theology or pastoral care, we ought to be going to Stanford, to IDEO, to other places around the country, and figuring out how to collaborate with new thought forms and patterns of thinking to be able to form pastors as not just thought leaders, but as innovators, right? Because I don't think necessarily that something's gone wrong in the church as much as the world has changed and we've not adapted. And we've kept kind of trying to make the church great again or something. And those days are over, they're gone. And they're not only gone to the extent that we double down on that, is to the extent that we create a type of idol that's going to have to be crushed and destroyed.
Yeah,
I think that's so good. Julia, as like a new seminary grad, right? You graduated in May, sort of new to Central and kind of new on the pastoral scene. Like, how does this stuff resonate with you? Thinking about your training recently, and then your experience like on the ground at Central. I wonder how all this stuff is kind of hitting you.
Yeah, I was struck by kind of, some of the stuff you sent out beforehand, Michael, but also what you just said, Matt, about the 1 hour on Sunday. And I think I've actually been feeling a little bit like guilty, or like I'm not doing my job right, because like the vast majority of my week is not me thinking about what worship is going to be. Even on the weeks when I'm preaching, like put effort into my sermons and I think about them, but like all these hours that like I was told in seminary that I'd be spending on that 1 hour, like I'm not right now. And hearing y'all talk about it, I'm like, okay, like maybe we're doing something right then.
Sweet.
But yeah, I think that that's something going forward. Like I'm spending time helping organize like diaper distributions and food distributions, and like, yeah, spending a lot of time checking in with like our small group leaders, because like that's where people are making connections right now. Even, yeah, like people show up to volunteer because they want to help, but also because it's an excuse to see people. And like, so I'm spending so much more of my work week than I expected. Like the ratio is not what I expected. And I think that's partially because we're in the pandemic and like other things have just had to take center stage. So yeah, I was struck by that and how maybe that's like evening out in a way that is healthy. And so, yeah, like how do we keep that going? Like still obviously putting effort into Sunday morning, if that's, you know, like, because that space is always going to exist in some form, most likely, but like our Tuesday evening diaper distributions being just as important as Sunday morning, like for the families that we're serving, but also for central folks and like the connections they're making, like that could be seen as church also. Yeah, I don't know if
that's
yeah.
great.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking, Julie, that what is that hour for? What is it really for? And if it's for engaging people in more of a lesson, of an education, of a training to be, then that part of the Sunday is it doesn't have to be an hour on Sunday. It can be an hour on Saturday or Tuesday. What is sacred about not just the worship service itself, but what's sacred about Sabbath that needs to be more of an understanding of who I am as a disciple and what you do, rather than the 15 hours that you or 20 that you are doing summer preparation. Does that move into a different space and saying, this is why this is important for you as a disciple? I think, Michael, the future is and I think Matt mentioned something about innovation. I'm kind of stepping back from innovation for a moment, because I don't know if we can innovate what we don't know. And I think that innovation comes with actionable pieces. And I think that the non-actionable reality of the future is what we have to deal with, because we can't act on what we don't know. And so what we don't know is that, what will this look like? I have no idea. But we can begin to ask the questions of, why am I doing this? And what's the relevance of this? And does it meet, number one, the mandates of the gospel? Because we know what that is. And we know out of chaos and out of nothing, God creates, right? So what does that look like as we move forward? And are we willing to take the time to shed that other stuff and pick this back up again? What we drop, what about my first love? I'm going to pick this up and really move forward and not look back at this stuff that people are telling me that's so important.
Yeah, Vincent, you got me thinking, Phyllis Trickle, who died, who talked about, I think every 500 years, you can look at church history and there seems to be these moments of reformation or rethinking, right? So first 500, you got Jesus, kind of a big deal, right? And then 500 years after that, the end of the Roman Empire, moving into the Dark Ages, rethinking the church underground. The year 1000, you've got the split of East and West. 1500, Martin Luther shows up with the Protestant Reformation. And then here we are right now. So it's interesting, I think, to peg all this stuff sort of on that timeline of what is being birthed. And if God is moving in history, like, is there some sort of pattern here that maybe something new is being born?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me just say this. I think you're right, Vincent. What I mean by innovation is not some kind of cat toy, we're trying stuff, but it really has to take a type of future thinking. And what I mean by that is that the way that we've understood faith in the church for years has been really around certainty and around assurances. That if I do this, it's going to work out because God's in it. That's not faith. It doesn't need any kind of faith. In fact, the church doesn't need Jesus anymore. It just needs a formula that works. And once it finds that, it ain't going to need Jesus anymore. It's just going to double down on the formula that works. But we're at a place where the same stuff is not going to work anymore. And so there's a sense in which we've got to reach back. I've been reading more Kierkegaard in the last 2 or 3 months, not because I like him, because I have to read him, because his understanding of faith is if you're not standing on the precipice, and you're not somehow maybe like going a little to the bathroom in your pants, it ain't faith, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what step you got to take. And still there's a voice that says step. And I think that's where the church is. And that's why we want to retract back, but we can't. And so I think what we find is that in some ways, Elvis has left the building. Jesus is no longer, in a sense, contained by the building of the church. Jesus is in the redemption of humanity, and we see that within Black Lives Matter. We see that within the LGBTQ movement. We see that in food banks that are happening all over the place. And if we want to retain what it means to be Christian, we're going to have to figure out how to think, act, and move differently.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we have to define, in ways that are relevant. We're in a society that people say Christian, and what does that mean? I'm a Christian. I'm a Methodist Christian. I'm a Baptist Christian. What does that mean? Does it mean that your foundation in Wesley is more relevant than your foundation in Jesus? What does that mean? That you have a label that you put upon this, and then don't have any foundation for it. You don't have anything that you stand on. So I'm thinking that if Jesus was priest, prophet, and public image, then what does that say to me as a Christian?
Yeah.
So my proclamation and who I am priestly means that I'm compassionate. That I show this love for people that I wouldn't show any other way, because I know who Jesus was and what he did. He had compassion on the poor and those who were sick and those who needed healing. I mean, that was Jesus. And in his prophetic function, he wasn't just out there speaking words that, rile people up, but he was saying this needs to happen in order for us to be the people of the kingdom. And that's important. And he said it and he did things, but he also made sure that I ain't hiding. I'm here. Y'all want me. Y'all gonna take me to the cross. I'm not gonna hide nowhere. I'm gonna be. So if we don't take that on as being a part of who we are in this particular time, then what we do is that we rest in this old nurture of this old place that the church says this is the nature of the church. This is who we are, and this is who we're always gonna be.
Yeah. People ask. I want to say when people ask if I'm a Christian nowadays, I say I don't know.
Ooh, that was gonna be good, I think.
Yeah.
That's gonna be real good.
That was God. Just kidding.
Did I break up?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
It was gonna be so good.
It was good. No, what I'm apt to say when people ask me if I'm a Christian is I'll say, you tell me what a Christian is, and I'll tell you if I'm that. Because that word has been hijacked by so many economic, political systems that it doesn't really cost us anything anymore. I also think in the real practical terms, partly we have understood the church as institution, and so we serve institution, but we forget the purpose of the institution. And the institution is to serve people. And so partly I think, I wonder if we have to change some of the ways we think to more networked and less to kind of these kind of concreted ideas. And the church has always been best when it has to be a network community in the world that crosses boundaries and borders in order to stay alive and true to itself. And we're finding that I think we're on the cusp of that now. We're realizing there's no way, unless we begin to cross borders and boundaries and let go of things that have become idols to us, will we have any type of survival. The word has already lost its absolute meaning in the culture. In fact, I don't know if it's even really helpful to talk about being a Christian anymore when you have 81% of all white folks that follow a type of ideology. So a political ideology that is bankrupt spiritually and morally. So, but that may be another subject.
No, it's good. It's good. Everything's on the table tonight. So yeah, this is really helpful, y'all. So thinking some more maybe about like this decentralization, like I think this is maybe one of the gifts of what we're going through right now is some of these ideas, networking, like I'm hearing Julia's kind of emphasis on small groups, or not this kind of hierarchical leadership, but a more organic piece. I wonder what needs to happen to make that reality. I've noticed during this season, sometimes folks get upset because they've, like Michael or Julia or Cleve have done church for them. You know, they've had faith for them, and that's what we pay you for, right? Is to do this. And so now that it's become scattered, people kind of taking ownership of their own spirituality has become something that I'm not sure we've equipped people well to do, or it's just part of the kind of consumer culture that, you know, I paid for this sermon in the offering basket when it came by. So I wonder, thinking about leadership, sort of that decentralization, maybe the gift that this time is, what kind of thoughts bounce around with you guys for that?
Or even, I would even say as it relates to kind of models of leadership as well. I think the question relates to one great perspective. A guy named J. Cole has a song called Middle Child, between Jay-Z and say 21 Savage, right? And I kind of felt that coming in when I came in the age of church, where it was deeply about, it was not only deeply patriarchal and sexist, but it was about the top-down model, right? And I think one thing I've learned a lot from my colleague Julia, and you as well, Michael, is you all were always much more open to a decentralized nature of leadership. Folks like me and Matt and Vince, we didn't come up that way. When we came up, boy, you sit over there and you just watch us, okay? And then we made you do your trial sermon and you do what I tell you to do, right? And no, you don't know anything. Why? Because you're not the senior pastor. Did God call you to be senior pastor? No, all right? It's different nowadays. You and Julia were trained, came over to y'all, used to collaborate with each other more. And okay, great. They got a good idea. Wonderful. We didn't kind of come up that way. So I want to kind of, Julia, I want to kind of hear from you talk about how interested in you to kind of join a church movement. Well, yeah, you're used to institutional hierarchy, but at the same time, you're from a generation that works differently. It's more collaboratively in nature. It's more open. It's more loose, right? And kind of what challenges, how that kind of challenge, and what this time does to kind of bring out more how that's effective, and what are some of the drawbacks to some of the old paradigms. So I'm interested in you, both you and Michael, you more than Michael on that.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting that you say that we are more, I don't know, I guess, trained in those things. I'm trying to think, like how it relates to COVID, but I think, joining this like co-pastor model has been, it's been terrifying, but also freeing. Like, I have the authority to do things that I never would have had the authority to do. Do I always take that authority? No, but like I'm learning. But I think it's been such a gift during this time. I don't know, Michael, you might say differently, but like this time of crisis, because things pop up and people ask questions, and like having the authority to make decisions quickly, and like kind of we can be in different spaces with people because, right, we're not together on Sunday morning. And so as things come up, I don't know, it is cool. That's like, anyway, that's not exactly what you were talking about, Michael, with the decentralized spirituality stuff, but thinking through the co-pastor thing. But I I have seen people, it's really interesting because I've seen people step up during this time, like people who were really, really craving, I'll go back to small groups for a little bit just because that's like one of my areas, but people who are really craving that connection. Whereas I think before, maybe I'm wrong, but whereas before they would have asked to like make this small group happen, like I want this particular type of experience. Like I've had like 3 or 4 different like potential small group leaders reach out to me and say, I want this type of group to happen and like I'm willing to lead it. Which is just one small example of that, but it's really cool. And like there are these little small, like not the same thing as Sunday morning experiences, but like it's church happening all week and like I have nothing to do with it, even though technically small group is like my area. And it's been really beautiful. And so I don't know what that means moving forward, but yeah, those are some thoughts about those 2 things. Yeah, Michael, Cleve also said you could talk, so go for it.
Yeah, real quickly, Michael, in about 1 minute. That's all we want to hear from you, about 1 minute, Talk about it.
Yeah.
I kid with Michael often, but really Michael has always been one of the most, I think, open pastors to movements and models. And oftentimes I say it frankly, forthrightly to people, it kind of takes a kind of self-security and assurance to be able to do that. Because oftentimes back when we were coming up, well, they got a good small group over there. Well, they try to start their own church over there. We can't have that, right? So pastors are oftentimes afraid of other persons having expertise and kind of creating room for that. So talk about kind of what in your formation saw the need to like do something differently, even like a collaborative model of pastoring and everything like that.
Yeah, I got a minute, right? So real quick, I just think I think it's so important that the world that we want to create, right, has to be reflected sort of in our leadership models, right? And so when we're thinking about power and we're thinking about, I mean, we did a Project Curate session one time with you and Matt where we were reimagining what non-coercive, like hierarchical power structures look like, and this like organic community thing that always proves to be more fruitful. Like I had some good ideas every once in a while, but being able to be with folks like you and Julia and members from our community, like it's amazing kind of what is birthed from that space. And so having that be like core to the way that Central moves through the world. You think about some of the leaders that are moving and shaking in Galveston right now, and all of them have some kind of connection to Central. You know what I mean? So it's a space that is like birthing deep leadership that's going well beyond the walls of the church to make a difference in the community, working with different foundations, organizations, movements. And yeah, I think like you were saying, Cleve, to have a space that's not threatened by that, but that seeks to cultivate that and send people out. I mean, reclaiming that kind of missional piece, right? The sent out ones. I think that might be a marker of health is how many people are you losing because they're going to do other amazing, beautiful things, right? And rethinking things missionally that way. So I just think it's important for leadership to model that for the world you want to create.
I have one more question, and I'm gonna shut up for the rest of the night, right? Because I want to push back on this notion of exilic, right? So you're right. We might not think of the church as being exilic, Vince, but there is a way in which those of us who feel summoned to a different kind of way, a different kind of behavior, even institutionally, will be exilic into the fact that we ourselves might find ourselves marginalized by the greater authority structure, right? So I'd like you and Matt to talk about how one negotiates that, especially deeply embedded within an institutional structure. How do you create room for others, push for these communities that power would want to marginalize while still being at the center of the movement of these things? Because if it's not for people like y'all, these movements would stay marginalized. But your work of constantly trying to bring them back to the center has to be challenging. So in that kind of way, you are exilic, right? There are ways that you all are pushed to the fringe, and behind your back, they talk about you, right? So in that kind of way, you are exilic. So I want you guys to talk about what does it mean for you all to kind of have that exilic existence within the kind of larger authority structure.
So one of Matt and my first, oh, sorry, Vincent, you go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead, Mike.
when I was like really early on in ministry, Matt and I were having a conversation about this topic, and he said, well, Michael, you know, all the prophets ended up either broke or dead. And I was like, cool. Like, maybe I'll go do something else. So, you know, I think just kind of sitting with that like, this is where the thing ends, right? Like Vincent was saying, the Jesus that we follow ends up on a cross as a political criminal, right? This is where this thing ends. And so I think it was spiritual wrestling for me that says, like, one, do I really believe this stuff? And two, like, am I willing to accept possibly what the cost is? And then working through my own like privilege in the midst of a system that elevates people like me pretty quickly. I have the opportunity then to sort of decenter and bring others alongside. And this whole solidarity piece that I think we see throughout the scriptures of, you know, Jesus, the divine, constantly aligning God's self with the poor, the outcast, you know, the whole Luke 4 Nazareth manifesto. What does it look like to embody that and model that and have a church structure built up around that? So I think this is what we're called to. And I think it has to be a calling. I'm not sure it's something that anybody willingly goes into because it's painful at times, but more beautiful than I think you could ever possibly imagine or hope for. So it's a gift. It's a gift. And to get to see folks, I mean, just the stuff that's happening at Central and the stories that pop out. And it's just like today, Julia and I, we missed a phone call earlier because we were taking one of our primary volunteers, Steve Regalado, who is homeless, but probably works 40 plus hours a week at Central as a volunteer. We took him out to lunch for his birthday today. And he was telling us it had been about a year since he'd been at Central and said that he was ready to be done. I mean, Central and then some really good medication sort of thing is what like kind of kept him going. And so those connections, so to be able to like be a part of those sorts of stories and opportunities is really important. So Matt, why don't you jump in? I might have caught him while he was frozen.
Like he's frozen again.
Oh, here he is.
Oh no, man.
Don't start cussing because you're still on here. So
yeah, when we come back to Matt.
Yeah.
Dr. Vince, go ahead, man.
Vincent was gonna say something, I think.
No, I you know, my wife does that to me all the time. She starts talking, and then I just tell her I forgot. I don't know what I was thinking about. But no, you know, the whole idea, I think, Cleve, in being kind of through this journey for so long and navigating all the and I won't say obstacles, but it's sort of like one of those, you know, those courses that you go on, obstacle courses. It's not really obstacles, but it's a navigation. And how do you use the gifts you have to get to the place that you believe God wants you to be? You know, and so I want to be in a place, and I always have wanted to be in a place where it was more helpful for other people to have me in that place than it was for me to be in that place. And what that meant for me is that all those tables that I sit around, I bring all of me, not any less of me, but I temper the emotional pieces that I know that raise up in me a strong kind of, you know, I don't want to fight nobody. You know what I'm saying? I ain't gonna fight nobody. I ain't gonna cuss nobody out. But I am gonna use everything I got in order to invest in the people that I know that God has given me in this process to support. There was another quote. I got all kind of quotes, man. I read so many books.
You can't read it. You can't read it. That's ready for y'all.
I've been reading stuff, man. So Michael got this thing going, man. I gotta read some stuff, you know. You gotta know what I'm talking about, man. You know, y'all crazy, man. But yeah, man, it's this whole idea of collaboration has been, you know, important because you got to find people who want to go in that direction, and you have to find out how to deal with the people who don't want to go. And then you have to communicate that in such a way that you can get some support if you don't get all of it. And so you just keep churning. You know, my deal is that I just keep churning. You know, I just keep bringing it out, putting it out there. And if you don't get it this time, I'm gonna bring it back another way. And if I know you got $1 million and you're gonna spend $1 million on what you got, then I know you can afford to give me at least a quarter of that to do what needs to happen in these other places. So that leadership place is one I think that we all can live in it, but you know, some of us just are better equipped, I guess, to do that. And Cleve, you know, the tables that you sit at, I mean, I could probably never sit at those tables because the language is different and the way it operates, but the outcome is, I mean, the process and the outcome, you know, is different, but you and I do this for the same reason.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I couldn't sit at your table either because I couldn't control my cussing.
You can control your cussing. I gotta find my quote, man. I had a good one too, man.
That's funny.
I wouldn't be able to tame my emotions down. You know what? Boom, and I lose all our money. You know what I mean?
I got my quote, man. Hold on. This is it, because I'm going back to what Julia was saying earlier. She was talking about how she's shaping these. I mean, really helping shape people. And Reggie McNeil said this. He says, "People won't let us script their journey, but they will help us shape it." You know, I think the church has always been this place where you go in and we got everything. There you go. We got it all in order. We're going to script it for you. This is how it's going to work. But that's not how the world is moving now. And I think you shape in ways that give people opportunities to really get out of their gifts what really God has for other people. Those gifts multiply when you help them shape, but not script their journey. So I got it out, Michael.
It's good. Oh, it's so good. Yeah.
Matt, unless you got like 2 or 3 quotes, he just might well be quiet the rest of it.
Matt didn't know it was going to be a quote off.
I don't think you're dressing like Vince did.
Oh, man, Vince is going to throw that down. I'm out. He's just mic dropping it there.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
It's so good. Matt, did you want to keep going with what you were saying earlier about kind of your solidarity piece or anything with that?
Yeah, I mean, some of that is, I just realized that at the end of the day, privilege and whiteness is a tomb. And it's not just a sepulcher. I mean, it's a tomb where there's rotting flesh that gets prioritized, and then it gets dressed up, and then it gets carted out as something that should be valued. It's in the end of the day, whiteness and privilege are to be used, I think, as tools to leverage a new world and then laid down when they're not useful. Right. So I think that my whiteness and my privilege can get us into some rooms where there's money so that we can feed the revolution, you know, and in some ways we can feed the new thing that's happening. But when that's no longer useful, you lay it down. I mean, I think I'm called to lay that down in service to a community where I'm a part of, but I'm not necessarily the main leader at all. Right. And don't want to be, don't find my value in that. So there's a sense in which I think this thing that God is doing is disturbing and disrupting meaning-making systems that denigrate other people. And I think that there is a new thing around the word that Vincent used, collaboration, and we can put all kinds of theological root systems around that. But at the end of the day, those kinds of new sets of relationships provide new meaning-making paradigms that we're called into. And I think that's the beauty of that. One of the beauties of that.
It's so good. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a prime time for that. You know, it's a rare opportunity, I think, for us to pause and say, what needs to be named, what needs to be thrown out, you know, what do we need to keep doing? And that's exciting. It's threatening in a lot of ways and to a lot of systems and institutions, but it's, I think it's a gift of the season right now. Yeah. So
that's why I said I had one last question, but I lied. I got another question if y'all don't mind.
What else is new?
But it's really, really for Julia this time more than anything.
Can I say this though too? You
Uh,
ask questions and you answer your question while you're asking it.
There
I
it
just want you to know that.
There it is. There it is.
my question is my question really is for Julia, and again, I'm just speaking this because what I appreciate not only about Julia, you know, her as a colleague is she and my own partner share this ability to kind of perceive and feel what's going on, if that makes sense, right? They have this deep perception and intuition about what's going on in community. And so my question to Julie is like, what do you think this moment, this pandemic moment, has really brought about as far as what people are dealing with? You more than anybody to me on our team are able to kind of attune that more, because I know I joke with my colleagues and friends all the time. It's like, yeah, people feel stuff. I don't know what they're feeling all the time for. But I do it in jest because I recognize that one of the key aspects that you bring to our pastoral team is the ability to be in tune with what people are really going through, even if they can't speak it. So talk about that for a moment, if you don't mind, about what you're sensing at this moment, what people are going through, and how we should respond to that.
Gosh, that's a huge compliment and a tall task, but yeah, I mean, I think there's the obvious things, right, that we've been talking about as church people since the beginning of the pandemic. Like, people really are lonely, people really are isolated. I think, yeah, anyone who has any mental health struggles, like, that's exacerbated. Even just like day to day, every decision you make is anxiety provoking. Just like, should I walk into this coffee shop and get a cup of coffee or not, is like whereas before it would have been like, oh, do I have $5 to spend? Cool. Like, now it's like, so I think, yeah, like those things, I think we're all aware of. But I also, yeah, just like, I've been sensing, like, I think people, at least our people, the people that I am in conversation with often, like, they're seeing the struggle in the world, and like, they're tired of perpetuating it, and they're ready to make changes. And they're, yeah, just, people are hungry for a different world, and people are hungry for like why, yeah, like, how to, like, I think people are asking the questions like, how did we get here, like 9 months into a pandemic that we could have quelled if we had all just cared about each other a little more. And that's not like an individual moral failing necessarily, but like a systemic moral failing that we're not. Anyway, yeah, so I think there's a lot of that going on. Like, people are lonely, and people are tired, and people are anxious, but people are also like itching for something to, like, yeah, like, we can't do this again. Like, if something that shakes our system this much, like, something's wrong with the system. And I think people are feeling that too. So I don't know if that really answered your question, but
No, it's
yeah.
good. We were seeing reports now on television about how, in spite of the CDC's advisement, so many people are craving some kind of connection again and going home during this Thanksgiving time. And as I watched it, you know, first there's this kind of presumption, why is everybody doing that? Why don't they just stay at home? But then you hear some of these folks talk and explain why they're going. And that deep kind of spiritual, psychological, therapeutic need that, listen, I've been isolated, I've been alone, I've been lonely.
Yeah.
Often not troll, but like look at Julia's Instagram posts, and she shares some of the funniest stuff, but also like some of the most touching stuff about like what it means to be feeling at this moment. So I just go through Cleve, if you were a normal person, what would you feel? Let me go to Julia's and see what she'd be feeling right now. You know, and so I really appreciate it. But yeah, so talk about, if you don't mind talking about what do you think is really at this? We know better than we should to, but there's this urge to connect in some way. What would you say that's about, you know, at bottom?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because I mean, this isn't probably going to be like a surprise, but like I've done it. We've all done it. Like we've all taken risks that we know we can't take, or we know we shouldn't take. If not because we don't care about catching the virus ourselves, but because we know, anyway, yes, we've all done it. And I think being like, the longer you're home alone, it's so, I don't know, for me, I'll talk about myself, but like, it's so easy, like day 4 of like not seeing a person is like, I'm in my head, like I live in a different world by that point, right? Like a world where people don't like me and everything sucks and like nothing is ever going to be better. And I'm sad, and the only friend I have, I got 2 friends and they're both my cats. Like, and so there's something orienting and like soul filling about connecting with people that can like almost be replicated this way, right? But also we're all tired of Zoom, so there's that. I don't know, and that doesn't like justify it, right? Like also you can't connect with people if they all have the virus and die. Like that's not good either. And part of staying home is protecting the most marginalized among us. But yeah, I think that's what that urge is like, you can only Zoom with someone so many times. Yeah, I really feel for especially like people who live alone right now, or like people who are single. Because anyway, I just got married and my partner's here half the time. My husband now, he's here half the time, and he travels to Austin half the time he's finishing up his job up there. And like, just even the difference between that, like when he's not here for a couple of days in a row and I'm, not, if it's like the days where I'm not seeing people for work, I go to a dark place. So I think that's what people are feeling, is you just, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to orient. So anyway, that was a lot of words, but yeah.
No, I think that's an important perspective to share, though, because I know we often, especially for people who are single or not partnered, because it's even a different feeling for those of us who are partnered, right? So on the one hand,
Yeah.
I'm away from my spouse, but I'm still kind of to her, right? That's different than folks who are really isolated. They're not partnered at all. Some of them don't have much family at all, ever. The only time they do see their families on Thanksgiving. And so I just think I want us to kind of lift that there needs to be empathy there as well before our judgment about why all these folks are just doing this stuff. Yeah.
Oh, this has been a gift. Lots of good things to think through, and yeah, just a lot of gratitude that there's folks like y'all thinking through some of these hard things. So any closing thoughts, words, the post-pandemic church?
Hey man, I always got another quote.
Get it, Vincent.
It was a quote. It was a quote.
Bring it. I want to hear it.
We need a third one. That's exactly right. This would be
Got
how
one more. All right.
Closing quote from the post-pandemic church. Go ahead, Ben.
I love it. I love quotes.
Look, another one from Reggie McNeil. Really, God is at work long before we show up. And so as we kind of walk through this, I just think that, before us is God. And what we experience when we get there is what God, before they crossed the Red Sea, God was there before they showed up. That to me is the hope that I bring to everything I do, is that this doesn't matter if we don't believe that God is before us. And God is already working out the details of the future of the church. Yeah, I believe there will be a church. I believe it will be different, but God's there before we show up. And we can't claim that we've done such great jobs by innovating or constructing or doing it. It's God's doing. And so that's where I'm going to leave it. And I believe that God will be there and we'll be able to celebrate and do wonderful things in our future.
Yes.
It's a good word.
So good.
Matt, you got anything with
I
that?
mean, where do I go? Where do I go after that? I mean, Vince.
Nowhere. I just want to see if you can.
I can pick the mic
Mic
back
drop.
up, but after it's been dropped.
That was exactly right.
You know, I had a spiritual director tell me one time that another word for faith is just risk, and that we have to risk the future. So whatever is behind us, we can't rely on, because these are new wineskins that the Spirit's pouring stuff into, and so we have to be open to that. So I think we're going to see a lot of stretching and splitting of old wineskins. And there's going to be a lot of wasted energy, a lot of wasted construction. And I think we have to be faithful to the God that calls us to a future, as Vincent said, that is yet unknown. That doesn't mean that we can't walk. It just means we don't have control. But as an old addict, that's the first thing you got to give up, is the illusion of control. And so once we do that, man, then who gives a shit? Let's go, folks.
Hey, you guys be careful.
It's safe. It's safe. No, the only I have one quote, Matt Russell quote that I use all the time, and it's full of swear words. Like, that's how people know Matt Russell around Central. So it's fine. So, yeah. Oh, he's the guy that says all those potty words. Yeah. Okay. So
I think I've been usurped by Cleve, I hope, in that context.
I don't know. It's close, man. So yeah.
Okay.
I'm surprised that I keep myself together when I'm around Central people. I do not curse.
He does a good job. So anyway, damn it, it's been a good evening, y'all. So yeah, I think Vincent's quote and Matt's kind of reflection is a nice way to close this thing out. So thank you for your time. We'll probably have to go back at some point to keep dreaming about what this looks like. But I love this call to risk, which is really faith and trusting that God is there before we are, right? It's not our responsibility to deliver Jesus UPS style, but like to go where Jesus is leading. So
Absolutely.
Vincent, Matt, thank you so much for your evening, and Julie and Cleve, thanks for putting up with me and doing this. So
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
yeah, good for y'all. Y'all have a good evening. Thanks again.
Right.
Honored to be with y'all.
Bye.
Blessings.
See y'all soon.
See you.
Bye-bye.